remember that when Queen Elizabeth I granted the charter for a monopoly in trade in 1600, the British government did not interfere in the company's affairs because it was private. But that didn't stop the company from being monitored by the British government. And they were very embarrassed to see these increased fortifications, the duty-free trade that they were granted from Aurangzeb, as well as the battles now that they were winning. And even the one that they had with Aurangzeb, just the nerve of the company to do so, it was very embarrassing for the British government, because despite the fact that the company was a private one, it still represented the British whole of England within India in terms of trade. So the greed that the EIC displayed of gaining profit, land, and taking over Diwani rights now of Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa, and Diwani rights were basically tax collection rights. So this, along with not knowing where the unchecked profits were going, was also a deep set worry. Because another thing I would mention here is that not everyone working in the EIC company was doing fair trade. Some officials had also started their private trade within the company, and that led to increased exploitation of the locals and the local resources, with an increase in tax collection, and continuing a very posh lifestyle back in the West. So this was also a deep set worry, as I've said, and at the same time, they also felt a sense of pride because of the bravery and gallantry of the EIC, as they had come out victorious in two battles against, a area which was fabled for its, affluence and its strength in terms of the rulers, despite the fact that they knew that, of course, the Mughal Empire had come to an end. There was still that glory attached to India, which was very difficult to erase. Government did have mixed impressions of the EIC, and locals back in India paying excessive taxes and having to live with this English rule, this increasingly English rule upon them, very displeased to say the least. In Bengal, being a very strategic location alongside other cities that were under the British now, the EIC had a majority of the population unsatisfied by foreign rule. Of course, this was very new for them. They were being ruled by Muslim Mughal rulers for more than say 1 or 2 centuries, and to just see all of that being thrown away and having this Western rule coming in was really surprising, because the most they had seen of the Westerners were in trade or occasional visits of merchants from the West. So this was a very big change for the locals, and they didn't exactly like it. And what was worse was the fact that the famines that hit Bengal led to the EIC's affluence in trade, and EIC actually flourished in trade with famines coming into Bengal. And this goes to show that the taxes were getting extreme by the day, and this put more burden on the locals, while it made the job easier for the company. And so locals suffered and the company prospered in this case, leading to an increased resentment from the side of the locals. Now comes the long overdue Act of Parliament in 1773. So now seeing that the government had, two impressions of what the EIC was doing and how they felt about it, of course, part in which the officials who were trading privately and illegally really, really worried the England government, and they thought they had to do something because there were famines in Bengal, there was a lot of corruption, and territorial expansion was, ever increasing. And then comes the question of governance, because of course, when you take over foreign land, now you have to try to administer it because now you've made the ruler a puppet. So the job of looking over the affairs, even those which don't concern the company, came upon the EIC because they had won two battles and got strategic locations which they now needed to govern. So the British government issued a warning to the EIC so they would start taking responsibility of maintaining civility within India. And the main reasons were territorial expansion, famines in Bengal, corruption, lack of proper judicial administration, and the lack of central authority. So most of what I have already discussed. And what the India Act did was that it gave the British government the right to take over the political administration within India. However, the EIC continued to trade because the Act of Parliament proved to mete out unsatisfactory results for the government. And so the government decided to give the EIC no more chances and took direct control of Indian possessions. Though EIC continued to trade, they lost most of their political power in India. Now, the British government was intervening in the affairs of India. A new system of governance was established with a central administrator known as the Governor General, who was helped by his provincial governors with social, economic, and political affairs. And there was a chief of army staff to look after the military. There was a police system and a civil service which had 1,000 British administrators governing India, and once again also looking at the social, economic, and political affairs in their respective sectors. And with that, a judicial system was also established. So the courts, they legitimized the British as, very considerate colonizers in a way, which is, they had asked Hindus in India and Muslims in India to relay their moral principles in order to make separate courts to deal with all of the local problems and cases. So a new system was established here, and you see the climate of India drastically changing here. And most of the locals did not take this very well. And this is also one of the reasons for the 1857 rebellion, because systems were something which people get immune to and they get used to over time. And when something just flips over and changes completely, it's not something taken well from the locals. But of course, it wasn't as bad because the misgovernance by the EIC, as British government put it, was a big of a problem to make this new system a small mercy for the locals, especially the higher class ones. And so expansion continued under the British government, and of course, expansion had never really been a problem for the government. It was actually a source of pride, seeing that the company that represented them in India was doing so well in taking over much of the land. But what was troubling them was that they weren't ruling properly and ruling to their advantage. So, of course, they established themselves, meaning the English government established itself in India. And now Warren Hastings was the first Governor General of India who signed a treaty in order to end the First Marathan War in 1782. So the government of England had started to fight long and very bloody wars in India with the Marathans, with the kingdom of Mysore, with the Amirs of Sindh, with the Sikh kingdom, which were all, respectively small kingdoms within India. And so these points that I have here are only glimpses of what was actually happening within India, with long wars being fought in overlapping years. So the peace treaty that was signed for only a small duration was signed in 1782, and then the Governor General Wellesley invaded Mysore and killed Tipu Sultan, who was a very, very well-known and strong freedom fighter in Mysore. He was the son of Hyder Ali, the previous ruler of Mysore, and very well known for their strength. So it was very surprising when, after long war with Mysore, the British finally won, and Mysore came under the British control in 1799. And the Nawabs of Awadh, you see, were also defeated in the same year, as I before mentioned. Most of what the British were doing in India had been done in overlapping years. So one thing was not just happening in one year, there were like 3-4 battles or treaties taking place within the same years. And the Nawabs of Awadh were defeated, and of course the British had control over their area. And then in 1803, Shah Alam II, who we remember had fought the Battle of Buxar, was forced to accept that he was under British protection. So this was the point where the glory was really blinking out of the picture, and Shah Alam II, the weak Mughal emperor at this point, was now completely left with no power. But of course, the Mughal dynasty had carried on till Bahadur Shah suffered, and we will learn more about that in the War of Independence. Anyways, so then in 1818, Marathas, who had a treaty with Warren Hastings, Governor General of India, the first one at that, really the treaty was now, as I've said, for a short duration. And so in 1818, the Marathas were defeated, and Bijapur, which was under the Marathan Empire, came under the British. And this is a very strategic location because it's a port, and this led to an increased efficiency in trade, and in turn also an increased profit for the EIC, which of course were still trading and now had a better way of fulfilling the demand back in England. Now on to the annexation of Sindh. So the British were anxious of Russian invasion into Afghanistan, and so they wanted Ranjit Singh, a very powerful Sikh ruler, to helped establish a pro-British ruler in Afghanistan, but of course Ranjit Singh, being very smart not to try to intervene in British affairs, denied support. So the British went ahead anyways, and because of a rebellion going on in Afghanistan, which frankly was a very bad time for the British to fight a war in Afghanistan, we're left with a bloody outcome, and of course, they lost the war, which took place in 1841 within Afghanistan. And so their pride was hurt, and they could really not take that. Maybe the EIC probably wouldn't have pursued anything more and just taken the impact of losing as they had done with Aurangzeb. However, the British government did not like their pride getting hurt. So what they did was that they turned towards Sindh. So you see, in Sindh, there were emirs, and they had signed a treaty with the British, a peace treaty in 1809, which disallowed the emirs of Sindh to wage war against the British and vice versa. But when Sir Charles Napier had provoked the emirs into breaking the Treaty of Friendship they had made in 1809, in 1843 the emirs of Sindh attacked the British, and of course this gave Sir Charles Napier, along with the British Army, the perfect excuse to annex Sindh, because they were like, hey, you breached the treaty first, so we are allowed to attack as per the treaty. So in this way, Sindh came under the British Empire. Punjab was under the Sikh Empire ruled by Ranjit Singh, who had made a treaty of perpetual friendship with the British in the same year the emirs of Sindh made the Treaty of Friendship, which was 1809. Ranjit Singh had done a very good job of keeping the British government far away from the Sikh kingdom. However, after Ranjit Singh died in 1839, his successors were very anxious of the British, and they feared that at some point the British would try to take over the Sikh Empire. And so with that fear, they tried to defeat the British and wage war against them in order to finish off any threats. However, that plan backfired because this was again an opportunity for the British to annex Punjab, and because the British had the upper hand in most of every battle, including the Battle of Aliwal, which was fought against the Sikhs in 1846, it forced them to sign the Treaty of Lahore, which gave the British most of the Sikh Empire and also made the successors of Ranjit Singh pay a huge indemnity. And Raja Jammu, who had helped the